The morning light in Illinois is gentler in spring. The sun spills across my kitchen window, warming the floor tiles I mop every day, even though no one visits enough to track in dirt. I place my chipped mug on the counter, steam rising in thin wisps from the dark coffee. The house is quiet but not empty. It breathes with me. Every creak of the wood, every hum of the fridge, this silence is mine. But even peace has a way of remembering. Some mornings like this one, the past returns with sharp clarity. I'm pulled back 5 years to that moment in Ronan's kitchen where the scent of store-bought candles clashed with the aroma of the tamales I had woken at 4 a.m. to make. It was Christmas Eve. I had wrapped each tamale with care, steamed them just right, and brought them over, still warm. It was supposed to be a gesture of love. Instead, it became a memory that clings like smoke. Ronan was scrolling on his phone, seated at the granite kitchen island like a prince in his castle. His wife, Cambria, perched nearby, sipping some frothy thing in a mason jar that cost more than I made cleaning houses in a day. I placed the dish on their counter and smiled. Ronan didn't look up. "These are homemade," I offered like a child trying to impress. Cambria gave a tight smile. "Oh, we're actually trying to eat clean this week." Ronan finally glanced at the plate, picked one up, took a bite, and then gave me that look. The one that always made me feel 15 again, scolded for wanting too much. "Mom," he chuckled, "these taste like rent food." I didn't understand. "Rent food?" I asked. "You know," he shrugged, "like the stuff poor people eat." Cambria laughed. Not a loud laugh, not cruel in volume. It was worse. Quiet, dismissive, like I was a stray dog tracking mud on their polished floor. That was the moment. Not the words, not the laugh. It was the way Ronan didn't even flinch when he said it, as if mocking me was as natural as breathing. As if I was less than. I'd spent decades working in other people's kitchens until my feet bled. Cleaned baseboards with a toothbrush for women who never learned my name. I took care of dying men who mistook me for their daughters, and I smiled anyway. I sold tamales in church parking lots to pay Ronan's field trip fees. And there he was, smirking over my food, telling me I'd never be more than what I already was. "You own a house?" he added, glancing at Cambria for effect. "Get real." That sentence didn't sting at first. It sank slow and heavy. I laughed with them. That's what I remember most, how I laughed along, even nodded. I folded the foil over the remaining tamales and said, "I'll take these then. No worries," as if I had anything else left to give. That night, I cried quietly in the corner of my apartment. The heater rattled like it was dying. Paint peeled from the ceiling. The sink dripped. But I didn't look at any of that. I stared at my reflection in the window and whispered, "Get real." The truth was, I didn't know what real looked like. I'd never dreamed beyond survival until that night. That's when the seed planted itself. No one heard it take root, but it grew. And 4 years later, standing in the backyard of a house with cracked tile and a sagging fence, I held the deed in my hand and whispered back to my reflection. Not in a window this time, but in a mirror hung on my wall. "Now look at me, the day I met Mr. Redmond. The winter wind had clawed through my coat like it had a grudge against the poor. I was early as always. The agency told me he needed full-time help, cleaning, cooking, and light medical support. The kind of job you take when you're too old for hard labor, but too broke to stop working. He opened the door in a thick wool cardigan and mismatched socks. His eyes still sharp despite the rest of him trembling. "Selena?" he asked, like maybe I wasn't what he'd expected. "Yes, sir," I replied, already scanning the floors for where I'd need to start mopping. But he didn't wave me in like I was invisible like most people did. He stepped aside gently. "Come in. Let's have tea first. It's too cold for work." No one had said anything like that to me in years. That job saved me more than I'll ever admit. Every weekday, I rose before the sun, packed a lunch I could eat with one hand, and drove across town in my beat-up sedan. I cooked him breakfast, folded his laundry, and read him the newspaper aloud. Sometimes he'd doze off mid-article, and I'd just keep reading to the silence, to the warmth, to remind myself I still had a voice. One afternoon when I was scrubbing the base of his bathtub, he shuffled in and said, "You clean like it's a prayer." I paused. "It kind of is." He didn't ask what I meant, and I didn't explain. That job paid me less than I deserved, but more than I'd earned anywhere else. And Mr. Redmond treated me like I was made of something precious, not disposable. That mattered more than money. On the weekends, I sold tamales and sweetbread at the flea market. In the summers, I offered to wash windows and pull weeds for the neighbors in my apartment complex. I skipped meals. I wore the same 2 pairs of shoes until the soles gave out. I never bought anything that wasn't gas, groceries, or rent. I kept a tin under the floorboards with every tip, every dollar saved from saying no to things I wanted. That tin became heavy. Grief had already worn itself into the walls of my life. My husband, Elias, died of a heart attack in the break room of a manufacturing plant when Ronan was 12. 1 minute he was making jokes with co-workers. The next minute the world folded. I didn't cry much then. I didn't have time. There was rent due and a boy to feed. I became mother and father, punishment and comfort, paycheck and prayer. Ronan was quiet after that, withdrawn. He started looking at me like I owed him something more than my exhaustion. I worked so he could have shoes without holes. I cleaned bathrooms so he could go on school trips. I lied to the school about doctor appointments just so I could take a shift. I thought all of it would lead to something better for him. Maybe it did, but it never changed how he looked at me. 4 years into caring for Mr. Redmond, he passed away in his sleep. Peaceful, alone, but not lonely. In his will, he left a small bonus for me. A gesture, not a fortune, but enough to combine with what I'd saved. It pushed me over the line. I bought a modest villa on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, old Spanish tile, a garden out back already half-grown wild. The ceilings were low. The paint flaked in places, but it was mine. On move-in day, I stood in the doorway with the keys pressed into my palm, the metal warm from my grip. "No one," I whispered. "No one can take this from me." And then I started planting tomatoes. It was a Thursday, just afternoon, and I had been kneeling in the garden, trimming the basil when I heard the gate creak open. No knock, no call ahead, just the sound of footsteps and the low buzz of voices growing louder. I stood, wiped my hands on my pants, and turned toward the back porch. There they were, Ronan's sunglasses on his head, wearing that smile that used to melt me when he was 5 and wanted candy. And Cambria, arms crossed loosely, her phone half hidden in her hand, as though this visit might bore her at any moment. She wore white pants and heels, completely unfit for my gravel walkway, and yet she walked across it like it already belonged to her. "Mom," Ronan said, stepping forward. We were just in the neighborhood. I looked past him. Their SUV was parked crooked on my curb, its engine still ticking with heat. "I didn't know you were coming," I said quietly. Cambria laughed. "Surprises are fun, right?" They didn't wait for an invitation. They slipped past me like smoke and stepped into my kitchen as if it had always been theirs. Ronan opened the fridge immediately, letting the cold air spill out. "You still buy this off-brand yogurt?" he said, holding up the container. "Wow." Cambria wrinkled her nose. "We'll need to replace all the appliances, babe. This stove looks like something from a time capsule." I stood in the doorway, still holding my garden shears. Ronan glanced around. "I mean, it's cozy," he offered. "But it needs upgrades. You shouldn't be trying to cook with that old range. Gas is dangerous at your age." "At my age?" Cambria trailed her fingers across the counter and walked into the hallway. I followed them slowly. She peeked into the guest room, my reading room, and then into the second bedroom. "She could sleep here," she said softly, not knowing I was standing right behind her, like a housekeeper. "But family, you know," Ronan chuckled. "Yeah, it'd be easier than moving her somewhere far." The words didn't hit me all at once. They settled like ash, slow, powdery, suffocating. When Cambria turned and saw me, she didn't flinch, just smiled. We were thinking long-term. With the kids growing, we really need the space. And it's not safe for you to live alone, Selena. They ushered me back into the kitchen. Ronan opened his satchel and pulled out a glossy folder. Brochures spilled onto the table. Photos of smiling seniors playing bingo, eating gelatin desserts under pastel lighting. "This place is highly rated," he said, tapping the brochure. "Medical staff, meal plans, activities. You'll love it." Cambria pulled out a second folder. Papers, tabs marked with yellow Post-its. "We've done the hard work. All you'd need to do is sign. We'd sell the house, put it in a trust, cover the care facility, and whatever's left, you could use for personal expenses." She said it so sweetly, as though this was a kindness, a gift, as if stripping me of my home, my routine, my garden. My independence was something I should thank her for. I looked at the papers, then at their faces, And I said nothing. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I watched. I watched as Cambria leaned back in my chair, crossed her legs like she owned the air between us. I watched Ronan flip another brochure open, pointing to the spa services like they'd erased my instincts. Their voices filled the kitchen discussing logistics, timelines, movers, as though I were a ghost haunting my own life. I walked to the sink, turned on the faucet, and began rinsing the dirt from my hands. Let them talk. Let them plan, because I wasn't finished listening. Not yet. It had been 3 days since Ronan and Cambria had stormed through my home like it was a showroom, speaking of me as if I were already gone. Since then, the house had been unusually still. No calls, no texts, just the occasional glance out the window, half expecting their SUV to pull up again. I found myself double-checking the lock on the gate, then laughing softly at myself. Not out of fear, but out of something else, something harder, sharper. That afternoon, a car pulled into the driveway that I didn't recognize. It was clean, polished, but not flashy. A man stepped out, tall, in his early 40s, wearing a navy suit with no tie. He had the kind of posture that told you he knew how to speak in courtrooms. But his face, something about it stirred a memory I hadn't touched in years. "Mrs. Dwart?" he asked gently. "Yes, I'm Darius Redmond. My father was Thomas Redmond. You cared for him the last 4 years of his life." I set down the watering can and wiped my hands on my apron. "You were the son who visited every Sunday. The law student," he smiled. "And you were the woman who kept him alive longer than any of us expected." I led him inside without needing to ask why he was here. He didn't comment on the mismatched cushions or the scuffed floor tiles. He sat at the kitchen table like he'd been there a dozen times before. "I was contacted yesterday," he said, "by a man named Ronan Dwart. He wanted a consultation on elder guardianship, how to declare a parent mentally incapacitated in order to gain legal control of their assets." I felt the breath leave my body before I even realized I'd been holding it. He said, "You were showing signs of confusion." Darius continued, his voice calm but firm. "He was looking into filing a petition to assume legal and financial responsibility for you." He paused, letting the words settle. I told him I'd need medical evaluations, documented evidence, and perhaps even interviews with your neighbors. He said, "None of that would be a problem." I swallowed. "So he's trying to take the house, not just the house." Darius said, "Your accounts, your car, everything. If he gets guardianship, you'd lose the legal right to make your own decisions." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at my hands. The same hands that once held Ronan's feverish body through childhood. The same hands that pulled hair from drains, scrubbed blood from tile, rolled dough for tamales, signed my husband's death certificate, and held the deed to this house. "I want to fight," I said simply. Darius nodded. "Once then, here's what we do." We set the plan in motion that afternoon. He arranged for a certified geriatric specialist, someone he trusted, to come evaluate me quietly, professionally. I agreed. I wasn't afraid of being seen clearly. My mind was still mine. He also brought small recording devices, one for the kitchen, one for the living room, and one for the hallway outside my bedroom. They looked like ordinary home gadgets. He showed me how to use my phone to record if I needed to. "Keep your voice calm," he said. "Let them talk. The more they say, the stronger your case." Then he asked if I had a will. I said no. By the end of the day, we started drafting one. A legally fortified document that would ensure everything I owned went where I wanted when I was gone. "I can't promise they won't try again," Darius said, standing to leave. "But next time they won't be walking into a vulnerable woman's house." He paused at the door, looking at me, not with pity, but with a quiet kind of respect. "They'll be walking into a trap, and I'd be waiting. They came back on a Sunday. I knew they would." Darius had said they'd try again once the silence stretched too long. This time I saw the strategy before they even stepped out of the car. Cambria was dressed in soft pastels, her hair pulled back neatly. Ronan wore a navy sweater, the kind he always wore for family photos. And behind them, their 2 children stepped out, each holding a small gift-wrapped box. Guilt. They walked up the path like a parade of good intentions. I had coffee already brewed in my hands. Steady the recording app on my phone, running silently in my apron pocket, Mama Ronan said as he leaned in for a kiss on the cheek. We brought lunch. We thought it'd be nice to eat together, just us. The kids were polite. They handed me their gifts, drawings of hearts, a clay dish made at school. My heart clenched. They didn't know. They were tools in a plan they couldn't understand. We sat. I served coffee. Cambria smiled too much. Selena, she began sweetly, we've been thinking more about what we talked about last time. We really want what's best for you. And after what happened last week, we're more concerned than ever. I tilted my head. What happened last week? Ronan cleared his throat. You forgot to turn off the gas. Remember the neighbor had to come tell you? A lie. No such thing happened. Cambria added quickly, and the fall in the bathroom. You had a bruise on your arm. I saw it. My arms were fine. I wore short sleeves that day for a reason. Ronan reached into his bag and pulled out the same folder as before, only thicker now. We've got everything here. The transfer of assets, power of attorney, the arrangements for the senior residence. It's a great place, safe, clean. They even have gardening programs, and Cambria added spa days. Bingo. It's like a resort. I sipped my coffee and looked down at the pen he sat beside the papers. I picked it up. My hand hovered over the first line, marked with an X. Then I put the pen down. I've also been thinking, I said quietly. And I have something to show you. From the drawer beside the fridge, I pulled out the envelope Darius had prepared for me. I opened it slowly, deliberately, and spread the contents on the table. First, the medical evaluation, dated and signed, official. Full cognitive capacity, no signs of impairment. Ronan's eyes flicked across the page, confusion rising. Second, the letter from Darius outlining Ronan's inquiry into declaring me mentally unfit. Cambria went pale. Then the voice recording. I pressed play. Their voices spilled out crystal clear. She can sleep in the small room like a housekeeper, but family. Cambria gasped. Ronan reached for the phone. I pulled it back. The front door opened, and Darius stepped inside, calm and confident, holding a manila envelope of his own. Ronan Dwart, he said, you are formally being served with a cease and desist and notice of intent to pursue legal charges for attempted financial exploitation and elder abuse. Ronan stood frozen. Cambria rose from her chair so fast she nearly knocked it over. This is insane, she shouted. She doesn't even know what she's doing. I looked at her, then at Ronan, and I spoke clearly so even the children would understand. I'm not your burden. I'm not your victim. I'm not your retirement plan. Ronan's face twisted. Cambria started to speak again, but Darius raised a hand. We recommend you leave now. They did, but not before Ronan looked back one more time, and I saw it in his eyes. Not guilt, not sorrow, panic. He finally knew I wasn't afraid of him. And he was right. I wasn't. 6 months have passed. The tomatoes are taller now. I added rosemary and a row of wildflowers along the fence. The garden is fuller, like the air around me. I wake up without tension in my shoulders, without that weight behind my ribs. I water the soil each morning and thank it for growing, for holding, for keeping me here. Ronan took the deal. Community service at a senior facility and a permanent mark on his record. Darius said it was the best outcome for me and for the grandchildren. I agreed, not because I forgave, but because I understood what justice needed to look like for me. Quiet, firm, complete. I don't know if Ronan understands the depth of what he tried to take from me, but I saw the photos someone sent him. He wears scrubs now, pushes wheelchairs down long hallways, serves meals to people who remind him of what he was willing to erase. Maybe he's learning something, maybe not. It's not mine to decide. Word got out about what happened. Not just in whispers at church, but in conversations between daughters and mothers, between neighbors over fences, in waiting rooms and grocery aisles. Women I didn't know began showing up at my gate. First one, then another. They came with questions, with papers, with tears. One brought homemade flan and sat at my kitchen table as she confessed that her son had opened a bank account in her name. I started helping where I could. Phone numbers, legal steps, emotional permission to say no. You're not selfish, you're not crazy, you're not alone. Darius visits sometimes with updates. He helped me rewrite my will. When I die, this house will go to a foundation that shelters older women with nowhere safe to go. Women like me before this house, before the garden. Before I remembered, I had a right to protect what was mine. Last week, I got a letter from my grandchildren. The handwriting was uneven, earnest. They said they were sorry for what happened, that they hope to see me again when they're older, when they can come on their own. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it gently and tucked it into my recipe box. Let them come when they're ready. I'll be here. The garden doesn't ask for anything except care. It grows anyway. Some days I think maybe I'm like that too. Quietly blooming, past the point I thought was possible. This morning I put on my softest shoes, tied back my hair, and stood at the edge of the flower bed with pruning shears in hand. My knees creaked. My fingers trembled slightly, but my back was straight. Because at 69 I finally understand this isn't the end.